All right, welcome everyone. I'm Leonore Chia from Rewild Your Heart, and I'm really happy to be here with my lovely colleague Hella Toon from the Nordic Woman, coming to you live from California and Germany. um, yeah, we're really excited to be sharing a unique webinar offering today on Kulning and talking about its history and its context and also what it's meant for us personally. And we'll also be sharing about our trip to Sweden in September, which we're really excited about. So stay tuned to hear more about that. Yes, so let's start with like just getting into what is this weird thing that we're gathering around today. I tried to put in a little recording here. Let's see if I can play it. Ooh, can you hear that?
I can't hear it.
Oh, I put in a recording of you doing Kulning Hella. Let's see.
Yeah, I can see this mouth. Like...
Well, Hella, explain what this is while I find the recording. Just give us a little context on like, what is this word? What does it mean?
So this word is basically a Swedish word that is put together by more words. The first of the word cow, like ku, and to coax or call, tempt, is in Swedish the word locka. And so when you call the cows when you were out, early days, grazing the cattle, you would call the cows in a special way. And so every woman could do this. And the kulning is like the cow calling. So kulning means cow calling, like ku and coax. Lock, ku, lock is the Swedish word. And it's like become kulning. Mm. And this is this communication tool. You would call your cattle, and you would also communicate with people from the village, other shieldings, other shepherdesses. And this is a 1,000-year-old tradition of communicating, and probably older than that we have in Scandinavia. That's totally unique and powerful and fantastic. Yeah. So this is what it means. But the magic of it you will hear.
I'll try to play a recording now. Let me know if you can hear this. Can you hear that?
I'm not hearing it.
No? Oh, I'm hearing your beautiful Kulning. Okay, wait. All right. One more. Thanks for your patience with the tech. 1 second. All right. Hella, keep talking.
Yeah. So these melodies that you would call comes from like the work with being out in the forests where you couldn't see each other, but you have to communicate, and you had to bring your cattle around in the forest to graze all day. And the melodies had like meanings. So you'd have melodies that meant, it's morning, I'm going out there now with my cows or goats, or it's noon, or we have to rest, or come over here because I need help. It's serious. And or I'm calling the signal for hear me, and then the signal for I lost an animal, and then the signal for goat, cow, or sheep. So that was all in the melody lines. They could hear this message, and you could answer, okay, listen, I got your, not cow, but sheep. You know, they would answer in a special way with a special melody. So they had these like melodies that they could understand within the area, common things that everybody knew, and then everybody would have their own tone of their own things they would call to their own animals. And so you could hear, this is her, and this is her, and that's him, and that's them, and yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's a basic like communication.
Yeah. So cool. All right, let's do it one more time. So who was that, Hella?
Who was that?
Yeah, who was that?
Well, that was me. That was
Yeah.
me doing my power Kulning of the wind for the northern winds of here.
Mhm. I
Yeah,
love it.
so I did
Yeah.
that piece. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so just wanted to ask folks, like, how does that make you feel when you hear that sound? Robin says, hauntingly beautiful, spine tingling. Mary says, wow. Yeah, that was pretty much my reaction when I first heard it. It's a very special sound. Lisa says, it tears my heart open and brings me to tears. Songs of
Oh,
my
oh,
ancestors. Yep.
wow,
Yeah.
wow, wow.
Yeah, Emma says, vast, far reaching, powerful. It is very vast and far reaching. I have been out there in the wilderness with you, Hella, and heard you over like kilometers. Like
Mhm.
it really works as this long distance communication and announcement. And it is very powerful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
This is.
it is.
Mhm.
So, all right. So I'll send the slide out later, but we included a couple pictures from this. So tell us about this, where this really comes from. I mean, pastoral or herding tradition, you know,
Yeah,
from this place in Sweden, in Scandinavia, not just in Sweden, although I put in a little map
yeah.
of
It's
this
like, oh,
particular
no.
place. But yeah, tell us more about like where it comes from and about the culture that it comes from too.
So the red part of the map there, you can see that's just a slight part, like maybe the northern part of the area, and then 7, 8 times that in the same area, like across like this in Norway and Sweden. So this was like um, everybody was a farmer. Before in times, we were all farmers. And some of us were Vikings that went out and slaughtered people out other places in Europe. But those who didn't do that, they were at home and they were farmers. And so you lived with your cattle. You didn't have a lot. You had a personal relationship with them. They probably had names. And in Scandinavia and Northern Europe, there were forests everywhere. There still is up here up there in Sweden and Middle Norway, and you wouldn't have enough grazing possibilities around where you lived, so you had to go away for the summertime to feed the cattle for the winter. And so you would like maybe walk for a day or two and then come to a place where you would live all summer. And so some of the people in the family would go there. Maybe the men would go work with timber for a bigger farmer or a richer person, or they would make coal, or they would do some work, or be away, maybe sailing away with for some what do you call that? For trade, and you would have a job on a boat and be away for years, maybe. Anyway, but some children and women and also men in earlier times went to these shieldings where you build a little house, as you can see in the picture coming up, where you could make cheese and butter and other products from the milk. And from there, you would go out every day in the wilderness with your cattle, and they would have bells on them so you could hear them. And you would have a horn with you and a long lure. You can see she's standing with a long kind of horn instrument, the girl in the picture. And that would your tools would be those tools, working tools. And so this would go on every summer. Maybe the first half of the summer you would be in one shielding, and you would move to another one for the later half of the summer because you had like been grazing off that area. And this was totally organized as a culture from the earliest books we have that tell us anything about the communities, and that's the church books from 14th century that describes how this was totally organized. So it points back on very old times, and we have traces of this kind of building, and with like traces horns, the horns that would blow in to blow the same melodies as you would sing from year 6 and 800 on Iceland and Norway. So we know that these instruments are very old, and that this from the first dated wells of information, the culture was exactly the same up until the industrialization, where ownership of land changed. Before, all the land was everybody's land to share.
Mm-hmm.
But then there came an ownership issue, and the land was parted up, and that that changed how whole farming was possible, and people could start grow grass and corn stuff, grains on their land where I lived. And they, up until the 20th century, we still had this culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it was alive until like the 1950s, and it's kept alive by now folks that work with ecological farming, or it's called organic farming in English, right?
Permaculture, organic farming.
And the singing and the musical tradition is taken care of by the huge folk music tradition that has been alive and unbroken in Scandinavia to where we're back. So this was like a very short version of
yeah, I love it. So you're saying it really comes out of the seasonal culture of people who lived on the land, worked with the land in this time before land was privately owned, when it was collectively held and worked with. And that Kulning was the practical tool. And that was also very much a women's tradition, wasn't it?
It became more and more a women's, because it's what is interesting with the Kulning and this culture from all other herding cultures in the world. This is the only place where it's a female job. Everywhere else it's a man's job, but here it's basically a woman's job, and it's to communicate in the forest. Mountains, forests, it's a landscape you cannot see each other, and the sound that carries the furthest away is the high-pitched, the female voice, where it is as its strongest. That is what carries the best, and you can if you have to hear where the sound comes from, that clear, sharp, high voice pitch voice is perfect for that. And so a little side story where this tradition has been kept on the longest time in Dalarna in Sweden. The name for a woman, the dialectal name for a woman is a kulla, and kulla means somebody who can kula. So it was just the same. Basically,
like tied into the word for
this. That's just part of being a woman, is doing this.
So cool. So cool. Yeah. For a time where women were very independent and had very independent labor, where you had to be brave out in the forests, taking care of your sheep and goats and cows.
Yeah. And these women, and sometimes kids, like down to 7 years, would be out, and sometimes they would not have adults with them. And the kids would learn from their mothers, and they would learn from their mothers, and also boys would learn from their mothers, the mother's word. And what was my point? I forgot what I wanted to say. But
well, just the independence. I think the independence is so beautiful. It's like a relief when we think about how controlled our experiences are now, or the helicopter parenting, it's just very moving. See someone is commenting, I'm tearing up hearing all of this history and herstory. It's very moving.
Yeah,
a more intact time, when just lived with the land, worked with the land.
Yeah, and a time where there was no safety net anywhere, and the tools you would wear, you would have your working knife everywhere, and you would have your horns, and you would use your horns to scare away predators. That would be bear and wolves.
And men.
And men. Yeah. Yeah, and you would also communicate with say we're coming dancing tonight. Oh, the boys are coming dancing tonight, and
Yeah.
no, no, you had to be strong and fierce and learn how to deal with being alone, and
Yeah. So cool. This music has really impacted me since I heard it first 15 years ago or so in the folk music recordings when I was out in the mountains in California, actually, and it was just like, like, what is this? I need to know what this is. And I just listened to it on recordings for a long time until I heard about you, actually, 5 years ago, right?
mm-hmm.
6 years ago. 6 years ago we met in Vermont, also in the mountains. We always engage with Kulning in the mountains, and you were teaching Kulning in Vermont for a choir there. So I drove through the forest to go to this little church out in the middle of nowhere, and there was the most beautiful tableau. I was so excited to hear it in person for the first time, and there was just this little church filled with all these people with cowbells and horns, and they're doing the Kulning, and I just cried. I sat in the front really close to you, and the volume of the sound going into my body just made me cry. It was such a powerful experience. Yeah. So yeah, and then that took me on my journey to learn from you and become a student and claim this for yourself, but for myself. But I wanted to ask if you would share a little bit of your own story of how you discovered this and how did it become your life's work to engage with this unusual thing. Yeah.
It's really interesting because when I was 20, I went to Sweden. I had been doing a sports school, and I discovered there that that was possible to actually make a living from taking people out in nature. It was before that, like, the outdoor thing became a thing. It was in 1990. So there was this tradition, and I wanted to learn that, and so I went to this special outdoor education to become a guide in like wilderness education myself. And I went to a 2-year education in Sweden, and we worked with a lot of crafts to make us able to be in the wilderness. They were very conscious about it was not a commercial tourist guide education, but you would learn crafts from indigenous people from around the Northern Arctic Circle to learn about how to be in nature on the premise of nature. And so one of the tools they actually introduced that they wanted us to learn, other than like making our own skis, sewing our own backpacks, making our own spoons and knives, and drying our own food, building canoes, fantastic stuff. We had lessons in Kulning from a woman who grew up with this and who was a teacher on a music education in the village that had a school out there. And so she taught us that on out in the forest, took us out where she had the family shielding that was family. And we learned, and I really picked up on that, and I was amazed by it. And I heard girls sing this on like a school holiday, like the school ends and you have like you celebrate, and we were out in a beautiful place with forest around, and those singer girls, they were out in the forest and doing this, and it was like that was just totally haunting and beautiful. And since I was out in the forest a lot, doing a 2-year outdoor education, after these experiences, every time I was out in the forest myself, I would go and shout and try to do this and find echoes and like just to find this voice. And I actually did so for 10 years. I moved from the place, I moved to Stockholm. Every time I was out, I just had to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was amazing. And letting out this big voice was also, I found out, like therapeutic. Like
Mm-hmm.
I could like get something out and did use it for that as well. But I couldn't help practicing. And in Sweden, there's forests everywhere and it's so big, so nobody's out there. You can do this. So that's how. But I was working as an outdoor educator with kids, and yeah, that was that. But I met choir. I thought singing is beautiful. I also heard on my education, I learned some folk songs. I met a folk musician, and I finally found out that I was not going to work with children. It was not my heart, and I was so young. I was like 24, 5, 6. So I thought I needed to change something. I didn't know what. And my friend said, "Why don't you come with me to this theater education, this physical theater, modern avant-garde theater school? It's really cool. I go there once a year on this." But they had this long course. So I went with her. And that's where it all changed. Because we did a beautiful body work and body consciousness thing and like improvisation work and scenic acting work. And so what changed for me from just singing, I had got an interest for singing because I heard so beautiful folk music. And I was really fascinated by the voice work I heard in the years in Sweden. Also from a Rudolf Steiner school where I worked. They had a beautiful voice approach there. But so it just came to me one day that it like just came down like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sing. I'm going to become a singer. I was 28 and I totally had to begin from the start. But it wasn't a decision that I kind of figured out. It was that we, through the body work, through the acting techniques, the voice, singing and improvising and working with creativity, creating the singing suddenly opened a world of just being very present. So it was a very spiritual experience for me. So
I
through
love
that,
I love that for you, this was really about finding a deep sense of purpose through using your voice, and that it came really naturally. And I think I know, like for you, there's this, like you are a professional singer also. Just
I am now a professional
you are a
singer.
professional singer who sings operatically and sings a very high level. But what I love about the way you express this creatively is it's so tied to just the real power of the voice. I mean, all the technical stuff aside, I love that your story with voice comes really out of a very wild, natural, present, artistic experience. And that's what you gifted me with in teaching me to engage with this vocal style too. Yeah, it's powerful stuff. I feel like we're giving people a lot of information, so I just want to pause and like make space for thoughts and reactions so far. Yeah, because there's a lot here. And gosh, the voice is so emotional for so many of us. Like as soon as we start to sing and open up our voices and open up our longing to sing, a lot of emotion can really come out too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll make space for.
Can I tell another thing? Can I just add a little thing?
Sure.
While we see what's coming up in the chat. So a part of this, the acting work that I did, a part of our work at training was actually meditation. And we learned meditation on voice techniques. and that opened up, that really opened up that meditational voice work. It opened up for me the way into meditation, and also meditation into the singing, into the music. So, and that I still bring with me, and I still think that is it.
Very much. Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to share a little bit also about because some of the magical uses of the voice as we talk more about meditation and kind of holding it in this way. MSS, I find the land is really great at receiving our voice, and it pulls beautiful creativity from our souls. Absolutely. That's at the heart of it, I think. Um, so we wanted to share a little bit also about kind of the magical use of the voice in pre-Christian Scandinavia and a little bit of the context of that. So would you talk a little bit about Galdr and what it is?
Yeah. So maybe for you, those of you who don't know what Galdr is, maybe you do, maybe you don't. So Galdr, yeah, it's like an incantation. The Galdr is described in our mythical texts, and it was basically a call out to somebody or something for something to change. And as far as we know, we don't know much about it, but the way it sounded might have been the same way as the Kulning sounded. And we know also from what we can find of text material from what's gathered around the Kulning and those traditions that you would actually go out and call for safety or for something when you went out in nature, and which is very close to the Galdr, where you call for something or to change or to do something for you or against somebody or so it is presumed that so the Galdr actually means to gale, to shout really loud and in a high-pitched voice. So just as the Kulning. So it is a call. The Kulning is a demand. It's a call. It's very powerful, and the power is the soul of the Kulning. It is really the soul of it. And so this way of connecting is powerful and probably has been linked to the way that you've been singing these incantations or these prayers or spells. Yeah.
And it also, again, a women's tradition because it was done by the old pagan priestesses, the shamanesses, the vulva, right?
Yeah.
Who were women and whose job it was to travel around, and they were like traveled and were paid to work these spells for people to ensure the outcomes they wanted: good weather, good crops, good harvest, good Viking. They were paid well and treated very well. It was an honorable, prestigious social role that really went up until the Christianization of Scandinavia in the 1600s, right? Around then, at which point it was outlawed. Yeah. And actually in some of the old myths, these women are very powerful, and even like even Odin has to go and ask one of them for her vision. So he even like the most powerful god in the Norse pantheon has to go and find one of these women. So I love that, like this deep thread of women's power that runs, through these old stories, and that is very much tied to the voice. I put in a couple pictures of artistic depictions of the vulva and Odin going to see one. I mean, we're talking concretely about how Kulning was used as a working tool. It came out of this agricultural way of life, but I know for me personally, the experience of doing it has been meditative, empowering, kind of mind like a bit altering at times, like because it's such a physical thing. You have to be very in your body, you're really in your breath, you're making a super loud sound. And for me, it has felt really connected to other worldwide uses of the voice to move energy, create an outcome, and also engage with like the natural world. So just wanted to also name some of the ecstatic song traditions that come from really around the world in so many different styles and traditions. But we had the Scandinavian Galder, the Tuvan throat singing from Siberia, which is where the word shaman originates from, the Yoik in Finland, which Hella is working with an artist currently and recording a collaboration around. It's very exciting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and then in South American indigenous traditions, there's the Icaros, which call different plant and animal spirits. Of course, the kirtan, like devotional, ecstatic singing traditions in India. I mean, I think every culture, basically, if you go deep down enough, has some kind of ecstatic voice tradition. And what's special about a lot of these is, I mean, they call in the divine. And what Kulning, I think, really is about connection with the more than human world in a very practical way. Because Kulning is not considered a spiritual vocal tradition, but you are directly linked to the land, finding places with good echoes. You're in relationship with the land because you're going to find a place that has a beautiful sound, and you're working with the wind, working with hills, right? It's a relationship.
Definitely. And so I was just focusing on how this was a working tool.
Mm-hmm.
But then, just as you said, in this lifestyle, in this culture, there are in the traditions, like every evening, and it was like this everywhere, they would have like the evening song. They would blow the evening piece on the horn, or they would sing it. The most talented in the little shieling village would sing something from her place, and everybody would stand and listen, or they would take and when this was heard to the other shieldings, then that a next woman would play her song, blow her melody on the horn, and like that the melodies would travel in the landscape. And of course they had their favorite spots, just as you say, where the sound was especially good. Maybe you could have more than one echo, maybe you could have three echoes, or a lake where you'd have the sound traveling for up to 5 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
That's far. And they would have time for a spiritual moment after the Christianization. They would sing psalms. And in these cultures and in these areas, this interesting thing with the psalms, which were taking the place of the spiritual moment, they changed the melodies because they had so strong, beautiful melodic traditions and melismatic singing in the folk in this music tradition that the Kulning is. So they would just put the text in their own melodies. Mm-hmm. So even there, it still carries the tradition of this old music.
Of the old music, right. Yeah. So the Christian music, was put on top of the older rooted.
Yeah, and unfortunately they kept on doing their own melodies and not just, wasn't taking over. Right. Melismatic, yes, somebody's asking what is that? That's like a music word, means an ornament. So we in every culture, old cultures, people have been liking to the beauty, the flowers, ornamenting, putting ornaments. If you see drawing flowers, if you see folkloric cultures, full of ornaments, full of decoration. Mm-hmm. And that's what melisma is like in the musical term. If you have a note like da, that's just a note. But if you decorate it and make it beautiful, da 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 da, huh? Right? So you decorate it just as if you would paint and paint, or you would embroidery, on clothes. And
Mm-hmm.
every culture have been doing that. Like you see on Greenland, their traditional clothing, they have like exquisite like bikinis and like with
Yeah.
broderies of also in leather. It's just like really, really
Like what's special about that is that this comes from a time when people made things beautiful just to make them
yes,
beautiful. Which,
yes,
and I think why it's so moving for us is because we really live in a time now where so much of our life is like maximized for productivity. That's what happens after industrialization, right? It's like time suddenly becomes about how much work you can do, and everything becomes like maximized for efficiency. So we really lost a lot of the beauty of the old crafts that were just about presence, making
yeah,
things beautiful because
yeah,
you can.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Mm,
it's special. And I think like why a big part of why Kulning has such a heart impact is because it comes from that time where you did this and you went out and you had your relationship with the land and you made something beautiful just because you could, and
yeah,
that thing of like finding your special spot that has like three echoes. It really wakes up for me that memory of like being a child when you were upset and you had your little place in nature that you'd go to cry,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
We talked about this once and we both like laughed and cried because it's like how we're supposed to be as people, you know.
yeah.
um so
And then it is true, and this I forget, or I there's so much to tell about this tradition. It's so rich. But remember that these people, they lived with their cattle. The
mhm,
cows were like having the most beautiful name, like Golden Rose, and like Sweet Silver. The goats were like Silver Spark, or
yeah, very
so
poetic.
it cannot be compared to our industrial like farming culture. It cannot.
Yeah.
So they love their animals, and there's so much love in the music,
Mhm.
and they really they spoke with them like it's totally different. Like we have our pets, right? I've got a cat or dog. Like that's more like the relationship they had with their important animals, but like more like the way we have pets.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
very important animals. So that's in it too.
Yeah.
And you would call the cows with like finding the cow way of communication. So actually, if you listen to a cow that says moo, the technique and the sound of the ooh is actually what the Kulning is.
Mm.
And the cow melodies were like just more beautiful, poetic, slow, than the goat melodies that would be more like with more energy and more movement in the melody and little, because goats was like that. So we'd call the goats the way the goats were,
Mm.
as
Which
we
is
call the animal.
which is inherently a bit of a shamanistic technique also, to go into, you speak to the animal as if you are the animal and you learning how to make the sound from the animal, in the same way that how did we learn throat singing and overtones? By listening to the water and hearing the overtones in the water, you know and how it's, so there's this relationship here of speaking to the animals and speaking to the
Mhm.
spirits in their own language.
It's ancient.
It is ancient, and
That's,
it's innate and human too to do
yeah.
this. Another thing that I really love about this vocal tradition is just that when you listen to a lot of these songs, there's these notes of sadness, like the blue notes, right? There can be a lot of joy in them because there's powerful, it's expressing a lot, but there's often these half notes and quarter notes, quarter tones that are jazz like and can be very sad too.
Yeah.
And the first time you and I really worked together in my first lesson, it was an amazing experience for me. You made it very physical. I remember, like, at times you were like standing in front of me and holding my shoulders, and you were like, push into me. So I started to push against you, and then you pushed into me, and you were like, now make the sound. And it was almost like we were like vocally wrestling and like physically wrestling. And you helped me find this strong sound inside myself. And then at the end of it, I just, like, we called and called, and I really cried at the end.
It was a very strong and beautiful session with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
it's a gift to help. It's a huge gift to be allowed to help another person to find that in himself.
It's a giving
For me,
voice.
it's
Yeah.
great. It's a beautiful experience.
And it's like a giving voice for me. It's a giving voice to, like, the emotion and the grief and the feelings that haven't been allowed, you know? I mean, in the culture that is so mechanized, is so industrialized, is so much driven by appearances. It's like, where do we have the experiences that are real, where we can just, like, really let out what comes from the inside?
Yep.
And this work of giving voice to this, it's so moving to me. I included in the slide a quote from Martin Prechtel, who's a wonderful Indigenous author. He writes a lot about grief and about praise, and how in the culture that he lived in, they're seen as the same thing. To go out and, like, cry and really give voice to your grief about a loss or what's happening to the land somewhere, it's the same thing as praising it, because it comes from your love of this thing that's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an honoring of it.
It's a beautiful point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add something about, yeah. So this is like everybody has a strong voice. So in my history, I became the singer. I wanted to learn skills. I wanted to get skills so I could become even freer and do whatever I wanted to. That was my goal with the classical training I had, was to be able to, like, do anything. Of course, you realize later that there are limitations everywhere. You have to choose sometimes. But everybody has their own voice, and everybody has a power.
Mm-hmm.
And so what came later, like, yeah, so many things I want to tell you, but I was inspired by your story, Leonor. Yeah, and these, so the Kulning as part of the tradition is finding your own songs.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually something that's interesting with this, because the tradition is there, the music is beautiful, it's a huge, you can dive into this and, like, swim for long and learn. And but a part of this is actually improvisation. It's actually me calling. It's like, it's a huge part of the continuation of this, giving this on, is that people have to make this their own.
Mm-hmm. Right, we're not just singing music.
As you can learn a song, you learn melodies here, and you that's how you learn the style. But then it's you, and everybody has access to that, unless you really have some severe problem on your voice. That's really rare. And so just to
Yeah, but it's like, instead of there's, like, the one right way to do it that we're all striving to do perfectly, it's really about finding our own authentic calls and giving voice to that, because it comes from a time in which it's like, it's more that we're all artists and we're all singers, and these are innate human capacities that are part of how we live and give back and contribute, because it's a living tradition.
Yeah, and it's a natural human. It's something that makes us human. It's something core human the music is something that is core to being a piece of nature, which we are. We're part of nature, and musicality is a part of our core. We have this, and speaking the language of music or of sounding, and not the words with an intellectual point to them, but that's another language where we can express things of ourselves that cannot else be expressed. So it's a big language, and we have access to that.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Denmark after 7 years in Sweden, as I decided to become a singer. I knew I had to learn. I had to change everything. I had a split with a boyfriend. I had to move. I had to start from all over. I had to start over in every way. I just found out Copenhagen was the spot. And so the Kulning, interesting enough, when I came to the city, became my link back to the wilderness and to the wild nature that I've been hiking in, skiing, canoeing, that had such a close relationship to physically. And it's been like that. And it has become the link between my being the nature life,
Mm-hmm.
the outdoor life, and then this, now I have an artistic life that
Mm-hmm.
is I live as an artist, so it's I'm linked to big cities a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where the jobs are and the colleagues are, but the Kulning is actually my link back to nature in like a very practical way. And
Right.
it is opera of the forest.
Mm.
It's definitely, that's what it is.
Mm.
So
I love that.
I'm
I love that. Yes.
very happy that I have that. It keeps me.
Keeps us sane in a way, doesn't it? To have that connection to the wilderness in our modern lives, definitely.
Yeah. And
I
it keeps you in contact with something that is very powerful, that we know, as you said earlier on, that we don't normally connect with in our caged way of living,
yeah.
because we have the walls very close to ourselves. And
Well,
so,
and that brings me to, one thing I wanted to say also is, I mean, there's the external cages that we live in, the jobs that we have to do, all the compromises we have to make to live in civilization. But, my work is working basically as a therapist with people around sexuality. And I work so often with people around the internal cages, the perfectionism, the self-policing, feelings of unworthiness. And I see how much Kulning is like about finding inner wildness too. Because as soon as we come into this mindset of like, I'm going to find my unique calls,
mhm,
and I'm going to find my voice and make my contribution in this way, you're like reaching deeper into yourself beyond just your normal day-to-day self that
mhm,
performs how it's supposed to be, but you're really going deeper into the soul. And
mhm,
it's such a soulful sound. Like
mhm.
it's such a soulful sound. What was that Greenlandic expression you told me yesterday?
Yeah, I've been searching for it.
Yeah.
I told Leonora about this Greenlandic expression. Maybe some of you might know it, about what singing is. And the point is basically that singing is when the force and the power of your soul is so strong that words are too small,
Mm-hmm.
then it comes out as a song,
Mm-hmm.
as music. That was singing. That's when the power is so big and your soul is so moved that something that's so powerful that's where the song comes out.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. I
so
was searching online, I couldn't find it.
it's
Yeah.
okay. You gave it
Yeah.
to us anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing that really moves me about this tradition is um, that it is an indigenous Scandinavian tradition coming out of that culture. And I was sharing with you yesterday that I think for Americans, so I think most people on this call are, um, especially for those of us who have Northern Western European ancestry, we're very impoverished when it comes to understanding the traditions of our ancestors. You know, we often have really lost connection with that. And if I can kind of make it political for a moment, like, I see how much culturally we're struggling with an understanding of who we are as a people and where we come from, because so much has been lost on the ancestral level. And it's very moving to me, because I also have Northwestern European ancestry, to feel into this memory of a time when people had intact relationships with the land and the animals and the earth, and that it's innate, and that we hear it in the songs, you know, and it's like a way of remembering this wholeness, this way of being with the land and with each other, where we belonged. And we really need this, I think, because I know it's just, it can feel so challenging in our modern time of disconnection and fragmentation culturally, you know, with identity. So to come back to something earth-based like this and actually feel into a tradition that our European ancestors embraced and lived I find is an incredible resource.
Mm.
I'm curious how other people on the call relate to that. You
That's
know,
interesting.
I know there's
Feedback,
some
I think you
ancestral,
would love to hear.
yeah, I know there's some ancestral stirrings for people on this. Some of the people on the call too. Emma says, yes, this is the path that I'm on. Sarah says, there may be some museums that educate people of their cultural past. A museum in my childhood city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin had, and maybe still has, an extraordinary old world village exhibit. Oh, wonderful. Northern European, the rough cabins and huts contained colorful items and beautiful carvings. Yeah, just as we were saying.
Right.
Yeah. Lisa says, this feels like the first step on a new path for me back to my Swedish ancestors, and I welcome it. Yeah, so great.
We welcome you.
Yeah. There's a wonderful essay I'd invite people to read too, by this woman, Lila Jude Johnston. I think it's called The Story of How Humanity Fell in Love with Itself Again. I'll send the link out when we send out the recording. She is a mixed Navajo and white European ancestry woman. She grew up on a reservation and talked about being biracial and having this sense of confusion or apology about being mixed race. And she talked about how, being Native American, she's like, there's a lot of shaming of being a white person, kind of downplaying that. And she said she realized she had to go on this journey to go to Europe and go to the places where her ancestors had come from, and go and find these old crafts and find the people who still held this wisdom in a sacred way. And she went and, found the people who could teach her about the trees in Dartmouth, England, and who could teach her the folk songs. And that was about seeing how much had been lost through industrialization and colonialism and immigration, and just really understanding the nature of European trauma and how that impacted what's happened in the US too. And so this deeper connection back to her ancestors, she said, is about reawakening the hope that before all the trauma that's happened, especially in the last 500 years, there really was this unbroken way of being with the land, working with the land, holding the land, being a children of the land. And that's actually really powerful medicine, especially for those of us who are engaged in anti-racist work in an American context, is to go back to this as well. So yeah, it's beautiful stuff. I'll send the link out.
Can I add a thing to that?
Yeah, please.
You just said, so I find it interesting, just the fact, think about that industrialization you could produce things bigger, and actually it made people not having to be craftsmen anymore. And so you didn't have to be creative anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of producing what you need, which was hard work, but so it was welcome that you didn't have to do this, but at the same time, you didn't have to be creative anymore. And now, when we don't have, like, we still have to work to have money to buy what we need and food and have a place to live. And then the free time now was supposed to be, then we can develop ourselves or be creative, but we don't have to be creative. So it's very common that you don't it doesn't necessarily lead to creativity, that you don't have to be creative.
Right. It's not just, we don't have to be creative, but for a lot of people, it's like, I can't be creative.
Yeah.
I can't be creative because I'm not a professional singer. I can't be a musician because I'm not doing it for a living. It's like actually a wound to our own like self-trust as creative human beings, I find. Yeah.
But we are very creative.
Inherently.
Basically, that's a part of our nature.
Right. Right. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I love talking about this with you. I could.
Yeah.
So fun. So, shall we tell people about our trip?
Yes.
Shall we? Oh, Emma says, wow, I didn't realize that that's where a big wound of the artist came from. Yeah. Yeah. Like the wounding of the wound of like the self-trust in us as creative beings, right? Because it's like when we haven't been encouraged about it, we've often been discouraged about it. We've been told we're not good enough, always compared to people who are better. It's a suppression. It's a suppression of our innate creativity.
Yeah, and then what came through the last 100 years is that a media took over the I'm sorry for the lack of words. Radio, television have taken over entertainment role. We entertained ourselves before. We danced, we sang. You know, in traditional, we as human beings and in every culture has been singing about everything we did. From making love,
making stories,
making children, working with whatever.
Right.
So the wound of the artist is also that. So we become used to seeing and consuming art, consuming somebody who is, and we're passive, like, and we're a passive audience toward something that's presented to us as entertainment. So we get lazy.
Right.
And because, as you say, and what is presented as very perfect, right? Like it's packed and it's produced and it's so perfect. So it becomes something, a measurement thing that
against ourselves.
So we measure, and the basic creativity that we have, we don't use that fully.
Right.
Because it's media.
And it's also that in this core, it's the core experience that we're consumers first, right? Like in our distorted, broken culture, we're consumers first and not people who have something to offer from inside, like from the soul, which is our own soul contribution. And that's how we relate to like the earth and the land too. We just consume it. Like the land is just resources for us to use, as opposed to like the source of our life to which we make a contribution through our dancing, our singing, our art, you know. And that's, again, coming back to like that point of we make things beautiful as a contribution to the world versus we just consume what's passively given to us. And that consumption is like, that's the origin of the climate crisis, you know? So it's all linked. It's all linked. I could talk about this with you forever. Okay, but we have created something from my heart offering, your heart offering. We've created something that we want to tell people about because we want to invite people to come on an experience with us so that this goes beyond talking about it and goes into really experiencing it in an embodied way. So, Hella, let's talk about our trip.
Yeah, and we actually find the things that means the most to us, like nature, being connected, being in nature, having this central connection and becoming a part of it physically, and that the understanding of like we are actually nature.
Yeah.
But it comes from being there. So that connection is important. The voice work and the Kulning is the next thing that has so many possibilities of in it to work with. Like it, you can artistically unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can dive in. You can open up on many levels, energetically and physically, emotionally. It can be a huge, as a tremendous tool for working with creativity. We have the element of improvisation, of expressing. It can voice work in general can take so many directions and be tools for so many things that brings us in contact with who we are, because the voice is so interlinked with our core, our breath, our being, our authenticity. And that's why it's so scary for many people to go into that. But it's so strong. So that's very interesting. And
this is going to be also an experience of not just training your voice to be a good singer, but and it's anti that, because this is going to be an experience of going out and making loud, wild, ugly sounds, shouting, screaming, making animal noises, making a weird sound. Like, so it's about the freeing of voice in this way.
Yeah, it's all a part of it. So that's so like voice, nature, and then the third thing I want to mention is that what I connect with Leonor so strongly in is our urge to be free, and we want the freedom.
We need the freedom.
What is the freedom, and how does that something? Well, you can talk more about that, but that's the third like strong.
Well, I'd say that you and I are both people who have been very called to live non-traditional lives as artists, and people who really forged a path out of our own soul work. And that has been really lonely at times, and has meant taking paths without roadmaps. But we are both people who have really, really been driven to seek out freedom for ourselves. And I think we recognized one another in that immediately.
Yes.
And and one of the real bases of I hope people can just feel like the genuine connection there, and how much this offering, this trip to Sweden in September, really comes from our desire to create an experience for other people where they can find and work with their own freedom, desire for freedom, and how to do that in community with other humans and also the more than human. Yeah. So we're going to go out there for 8 days in Sweden, same region as you saw on the map earlier, very close to the border of Norway, and have a trip full of this voice work. I'm going to be bringing a lot of the authentic movement and the embodied storytelling work, which I lead groups in as well. And we're going to do a lot of the wilderness arts too, the spoon carving, making fires, and just being with the land in a real way. We did this trip first 5 years ago, and we did it actually as a backpacking trip. And then we realized that, for people coming from the US who are dealing with a lot of jet lag and fatigue, we needed something more supportive to the body. And I'm so excited because we have found an amazing place. We have really found an incredible place to do this. So
it's rare.
It is rare. So this is going to be out there close to the border in Norway. Folks who are coming are actually going to fly to Oslo, a little town in Norway, and then we'll go across the border. But can you talk a little bit about this, kind of what the lodge is and sort of its own traditional roots?
Yeah. So this lodge have become a little bigger, as you can see in the pictures, than what it was from the start, which is it's actually um, an old farming, like a shielding house that's been traditionally used for specifically this, like having the cattle out in summer times as a shielding. So the history of this place is exactly the culture of Kulning and that summer farming life. Um, and they have kept this place like undestroyed. They've kept the old buildings and just built out, and they kept it in style that's like closer to authentic, still luxurious, comfortable, but not modernizing it up
Right.
to something just modern, which is well, you can't find this anywhere. So we had just we almost had it was by accident. Just in the end of our deciding on how to do this time, we found this place and said, okay, we
We
just have
have to
to.
do this. We have to do
This is the
this.
place.
Yeah.
And
And
they are super excited of having us because this is their story of this place. The owner is a chef and will cook for us in the evenings.
and it was owned by
Uh,
his grandparents, I think.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
owned by his grandparents who lived this traditional
in the
life. And
family.
so they're really excited to have people who want to come and engage with this, yeah,
Yeah,
traditional work.
they are very excited about us coming in and actually we're going to sing in the landscape for a week,
Yeah.
which has been like this. There are people living in these places that still remember that when they were small, that's how it sounded,
Hmm.
and it's very touching when
It's true. When we were there 5 years ago, I saw anyone who I told, oh, we were out doing this thing, they were like, oh, like they really moved by it, it's like really touching. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
very special. It's very special. So the way we consider landscape to be wild, it's like silent. You can hear every bird. There's no human impact. The landscape here, like hundreds, like for centuries, has been in the summer times alive. There's been bells, cowbells. On you could hear the bells. You would hear calls, shouts, song, horn blowing. You'd smell fire from the in the valleys from when they like had the charcoal, the old way of making charcoal. You would hear chopping of wood.
Hmm.
There's real life in this, like spread out.
Yeah.
And this is connected with so much love and positive emotional for the people who have come from a farming life and where in summertime their grandmother or their mothers did this. They
Hmm.
still live. Um, and that's unique for this place. And we really welcome there.
And we're going to have a lot of time outdoors. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's going to be very much of this nature immersion, but it was important to me to have a space where people could also, sleep in a comfortable bed, have a hot shower, have a good food, because a lot of, as soon as we really, this is deep work, it can be really tiring. So I wanted to create an experience that would be really restful and nourishing. And then instead of being like, okay, now we're going to go do this really like intense hike and like, conquer that. I mean, we're going to have a lot of great outdoor experience, but
Yes.
the goal, I think our value is really to have an experience of deep presence
Yeah.
more than it is about like accomplishment, as is so often a struggle for us in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
So I invite you. This is for you if you want to do this work, to spend 8 days out in the wilderness in a lovely wilderness hotel with us, but immersed in all of this. Um, this will really be an experience of deeper connection to wildness, internal wildness and external wildness. And it is really going to be about unplugging from the pressures and the urgency and the intense demands that so many of us live in on a day-to-day level. And in that way, it is really going to be about sacred time with our own inner world. We'll have a lovely group, we'll have great experiences together, but we're also going to have a lot of alone time, really working with the deliberate use of silence, of just going out and sitting in the landscape, having a meditative experience with the land, writing in your journal, like a deeper presence, stillness, and that kind of deep nourishment. And we're
Yes.
going to do so much of the Kulning work, which I'm really excited about. So this will be a deep experience of engaging with this tradition in the original landscape that it comes from. And there's really nothing else like this, as far as I know, where you can go and learn how to do this in the original place. It is a unique offering, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes time to make your own
Hmm.
this kind of strong expression, and it takes time also to get out in nature.
Hmm.
It takes 3 days to
Yeah.
land to
The
to
body gets there, but then the mind, the
yeah.
spirit takes a
And
while.
also before you go home, you prepare yourself. It's 2-3 days before that you're gonna get home. So we need the space
Yeah.
to really have the feeling that we are in a timeless space in a way, and away from our the artificial rhythms
Yeah.
that we have here. So we're gonna try to stick to like the natural rhythms,
Hmm.
and uh, the creativity and the all the ornaments of our life, of our day, is our creativity.
Hmm.
That's the ornament of being,
Mm,
and it needs time and space around it.
exactly.
So
It's going to be
we
a
will like
journey in and a
we will
journey
like
out.
unfold things and take things away that like keeps us from us, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
what all these things, all this can give us, being remote and being in the wilderness, and working with like expressive things, body wise, um, tales,
Hmm.
singing. It's gonna to connect us to ourselves,
Hmm.
and then we can connect better to nature.
Exactly.
Like, because we have to be able to be present, to be able to feel and sense,
Exactly.
and that is really one of the biggest problems today.
Yeah.
It's not what we learn how to be really there, because when we're really there, we don't need a lot around us.
Right. Right.
Then there's a lot in there, and that's what we want to share,
So we're gonna
find,
do. Yeah.
open doors to.
Yeah. So this is not this is not a tourist experience about consuming, showing up, and being entertained, and then going home. It's not for people who hate being outdoors. It's not for people who cannot hike comfortably for a day. I mean, it's not the most hardcore wilderness experience, but we are gonna really enjoy the vigor of being in our bodies and being out there. So ju- just putting that clearly. And it's also not about like accomplishing out outdoor feats from a perspective of
Yeah.
conquering in nature. So if you want a backpacking trip, this is not a backpacking trip either. So I wanted to be clear about like the balance of things that this is, because it's kind of an unusual offering.
Yeah.
So this is our invitation. If you have stuck with us this long and would like to come and engage with us in this beautiful work, I hope we've done I hope we've communicated what our vision for what this is, just beyond like, okay, we're going to go sing these songs, but the extent to which we're holding this is a deeper experience of nature communion with internal and external wildness. Um, because that's really important to us. So if you feel called to join us, come do it. We're going to be out there for 8 days. The tuition covers all of the lodging, all of the food. You do need to get yourself to and from Sweden. We'll send you the instructions on how to do that, on terms of which flights to buy, but you have to buy your airfare separately. But once you're there, everything is included in terms of the curriculum that we're offering, all the logistical needs, and really this guided tour or this guided journey into this work.
Mhm.
And so I just want to let you know that the tuition is 3,500 before June 30th, and then it goes up after that. So if you're thinking about it, I would really recommend that you apply sooner than later and have a conversation with me to just review your application, talk over if it's a good fit. We'll make time to answer questions or talk about any fears or concerns that you have, and also really understand the vision of what you want to get out of this. So I would really, really strongly recommend that you go to this link, thenordicwoman.com/apply, and fill out the form there, and book a time with me in the next couple days to just talk about this and see if it's the right fit for you to come and move forward. It is going to be such a special and rare and gorgeous experience that we're really, really excited to do. We have payment plans, totally happy to work out a payment plan with you, so don't worry about that. But if you feel called on this deep level, come and play with us. It is going to be so fun and so nourishing, and really comes from something that Hella and I both really want and need ourselves. So I hope you feel the authenticity of this vision. I'll make time for any other thoughts or questions or just comments that people have as well. So I'd love to just check in about where folks are at with that, and also just hear from you, Hella, about anything else that you would like to share.
Yeah, like a really cool thing is that what we learned from the first trip, the wilder one, the more tougher one, that was that, well, I knew that we couldn't do it anyway, any other way. You saw pictures with people with mosquito nets on them. See, we don't need that in September because that season is over. There will be no gnats, no mosquitoes, and the landscape is going to be in the colors that it's a perfect time of year to experience Scandinavian mountains. Really, seriously, that's when you want to do hiking in Scandinavia. It's in September, so it's really the best time of year. It's going to be the most beautiful there. So, which is a great comfort. This gives us a lot of possibilities to be outside, and yeah, it's going to be comfortable season simply. So that, and yes, I really look so much forward to share like the things that I value the most that I can give from my the places I went in life, and bring into this work from the acting drama work I did, the voice work I did, and the profession I have now, and then the nature, the outdoor life that I've spent years being in nature. It's like these things together, and we have a creative space, playful space. We'll have fantastic things will happen. So, and if we're lucky with the weather, you might get a really good recording of you doing Kulning on your perfect spot with the echo you like. Your home. We hope so. It's a weather thing. So we'll even we have a Sami possibilities to experience some Sami culture around there as well. So very, very unique. There is no other workshop like this. It doesn't really exist. So back to the wild.
Back to the wild.
Safely back to the wild.
Right. We're going back. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Leonor, for...
Yeah, it's my vision, as soon as I met you like 5-6 years ago, I really had a vision of doing this with you. And I think I'm really excited because it's taken me a couple years to really to understand to the roots of what this is and why it's important. It's not just about going there and doing this thing, but really feeling and being on a deep level, and how badly we need that. And also the tools and experiences that help us to get there, on a deep level, through authentic movement, through the kind of meditative voice work, through the alone time. It's going to be really special.
It is. The freeing oneself is just what we want to do, and we have all those tools we can share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's the dream. It's a dream situations
Mhm.
for combining creative work, personal inner work, and outdoor experience that is not a tourist experience, but that's actually authentic and yeah, real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm getting
Mhm.
really excited as we're talking about it. Yeah. All right. Well, if there are, yeah, any questions or comments from folks, thank you all for coming and wanting to learn about this niche tradition. That's it's definitely niche, but I hope we've
Mm.
opened the door to some inspiration for you and yeah, some encouragement to go out and find your own voice in your own calls and hopefully to come join
Yeah.
us.
And any questions you might have about your voice or technical issues, or like I will solve them and answer them there. And you can even, if you have questions before, please write to us or
Yeah.
um,
And it's important to say
message
too
me.
that you
Or,
don't have to have any like you don't have to be a singer to do this, right? Because
no,
often when people get worried about Hellas, they're like, "Oh, do I have to be an experienced?"
no, no. I have a. It's been very interesting working with this over the years. So I learned this in 1990, and it's been very very interesting to teach Kulning. And to actually find out what works with people who have no singing experience. Um, and it definitely is possible and maybe not even difficult. It's very, the difficulty key can be something that's not at all a physical issue. It can be the courage to be there and to do this, but but I have so much experience with voices and technical issues on all levels what's related to the voice breath. So we are gonna open, like make it possible, like physically and musically and technically for anybody on whichever level you have. I had an opera singer on a weekend course once, and she really struggled to get this. And she was an opera singer, like doing Wagner operas, and had a big voice, and she had her kind of struggles. So it's not about what you already can do or not do. It's just, is this really fun? Would this be really cool? Then it would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming and being with us. And we hope to see you in Sweden in a couple months. So we'll
Yeah.
release you and wish you a wonderful day. Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for listening and yeah, being here with us.
Yes.
And please share um, this.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.